All right, my name is Mike Barley. We're going to start the press conference here. We're going to start off with brief remarks from the bishop and our legal counsel, Matt Haverstick, and then we'll have time for questions.
Mike, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank all of you for coming this afternoon to this news conference. The announcement that I make today is that the Roman Catholic Diocese of Harrisburg has filed for bankruptcy under Chapter 11 of the United States Bankruptcy Code. Known as reorganization bankruptcy, this plan will allow us to continue the Church's work in our diocese while equitably compensating our creditors. This difficult decision was made after countless hours of prayer, consultation, and careful deliberation with our financial experts, attorneys, and with the unanimous approval of those canonical bodies in a diocese that is required, namely our College of Consultors and the Diocesan Finance Council. Before the grand jury investigation, the diocese's economic status was in very challenging condition. Despite all attempts to scale back our operational costs, to reduce our overhead, and to make staff reductions, our diocesan financial position was unhealthy. Beginning in September 2016, we had to respond to the grand jury investigation, which forced us to incur heavy legal costs. Even after the grand jury concluded, those legal costs continued to mount, and they have had harsh financial consequences for the diocese. Our current financial situation is unsustainable going forward. Given recent changes in the law, both here in Pennsylvania and in New Jersey, where we are already named in one lawsuit and where we anticipate more to follow, we have no other path forward to ensure the future of our diocese than reorganization bankruptcy. Despite the success of our survivor compensation program, which helped 111 survivors of clergy child sexual abuse, or 96% of those who participated in the program, we are already in receipt of a half dozen new lawsuits, any one of which could bankrupt the diocese. As the bishop, I must ensure the diocese's core mission is upheld, which is to remain focused on Christ's mandate to preach, teach, sanctify, and to serve those in need. We must work to bring the Chapter 11 process to a conclusion as soon as is reasonably possible, and in a way that allows us to be present to the communities throughout our 15 counties, as we have been for the past 152 years. This is the correct path forward for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Harrisburg. While we are confronting a harsh reality, I hope that our parishioners can see that this action presents a path for our diocese to move forward. My comments will be brief, as we do not have many concrete answers at this point regarding what our diocese might look like moving forward, because we are just beginning, obviously, the bankruptcy process. However, I would like to deliver a message directly now to the survivors of sexual abuse. On behalf of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Harrisburg and in my own name, I continue to offer my heartfelt apologies for the abuse you suffered. I also offer my apology and deepest regret that the diocese did not do more to protect you. My commitment to you stands. We must continue offering all survivors of abuse the support they need and deserve, and ensure that the atrocities you suffered are never repeated again in our diocese. Bankruptcy will help to stabilize the diocese's financial situation, and my intention is to ensure that we are able to continue providing counseling services free of charge to support all survivors of abuse. Additionally, I want to address our faithful parishioners. On behalf of the diocese and myself, I want to again offer our apologies to you. The position our diocese finds itself in is unfortunate, and I am so sorry that you are being put in this position because of our horrific past. My hope and prayers are that while we may face some troubling days ahead, our diocese will be able to restructure our finances and our operations and come out stronger in the future than we are today. Lastly, I want to acknowledge and thank the work of our priests who every day do their ministries under some very difficult circumstances. This has been a difficult time for our clergy, as the actions of a few have unfortunately impacted all of our ministries, and for that, I am grateful to our priests for their steadfast, faithful ministry to our people. I also want to thank our deacons, consecrated religious, our diocesan staff, and all those who work and minister in our parishes, our schools, and institutions for the work that they do every day. These have been difficult times in our diocese, but everyone has been committed to our faith and to our ministries of service. Over the coming days and months, we will be releasing additional details as we chart a new path for the future of our diocese. When I think about our current situation and the future, I cannot help but think about what it will take to rebuild and strengthen our diocese as we move forward. You cannot build anything without a strong and solid foundation. Our Lord tells a parable in the 6th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, the parable of the two houses, one built on rock, the other built on sand. And at verse 48, we read, "He is like a man building a house who dug deeply and laid the foundation on rock. When the floods came, the river burst against that house and could not shake it, because it had been well built." Our diocese currently lacks that strong foundation. However, at the end of this difficult process, we will again have that solid foundation on which to build. I pray that Mary, Mother of the Church, will continue to intercede for all of us with her Son for the graces that we need to be even more effective in our ministries and in our presence in central Pennsylvania in the months and the years to come. For brief remarks and for specific questions on how this bankruptcy will impact the future of the diocese, our current operations, and our financial commitments, I now turn things over to our attorney, Matt Haverstick, who has been advising us on these issues, and our spokesman, Mike Barley.
Good afternoon. Let me say a couple of quick remarks before I take your questions. It's a solemn day at the diocese. We all recognize that. But it's important for everyone who is reading your stories, listening to this press conference today, to understand that tomorrow in the diocese is going to look exactly like yesterday in the diocese. Church is going to be open. Schools are going to be open. The charitable works are going to continue in the diocese. That's not changing. People need to be assured that, like I said, tomorrow is going to look like yesterday. The other thing I want to say before I take questions is that I'm not going to take questions on hypotheticals, mostly because no one in this process can tell you what the end of the process is going to look like yet. It's just not possible. We expect there will be changes. That's what happens in these reorganizations. But what that means in specific terms, I don't know. No one in this room knows. That's up to lawyers and judges and others to figure out some time from now. And it's just not the kind of thing that I care to or even could guess at today. So I'm not gonna. All right, so with that, whatever questions you have.
Your bankruptcy filing says it's not going to be possible to pay all alleged claims in full going forward. I'm assuming that refers to the litigation that's still in process or that you're expecting. do you know, to what extent you'll be able to pay out claims in the future, or if that's not going to be possible at all?
No, so what happens in a bankruptcy is all the claims that exist up until a set point in time, and that'll be decided by the bankruptcy court, will be subject to making their claims against a trust that's funded by assets from the diocese and ideally insurance proceeds, hopefully largely insurance proceeds. So the actions that are in court now will get stayed in those courts, but they'll get moved over to the bankruptcy action. And future actions and claimants up until a particular point in time, again, will make their claims against the assets that are controlled by the bankruptcy court.
Matt, Harrisburg Diocese is a 15-county diocese. According to the filing, the diocese puts its estimated value assets between $1 million and $10 million. That seems like, to me, seems like a really, really low number.
Well, you understand, the parishes are not in bankruptcy. The schools are not in bankruptcy. The entity in bankruptcy is the Diocese of Harrisburg. So when you're thinking about numbers or anything like that, understand what's not part of the bankruptcy action. So it's not all of those parishes, it's not all those parish assets.
Are you referring to just liquid assets there, or?
No, the parishes are not part of the bankruptcy. They are not debtors in the bankruptcy action, nor are the schools.
Is it possible for you to tell us how many different trusts there are that are not subject, according to this filing, to any future legal claim payouts, and how many assets are in those?
No, it's impossible. I can't tell you that.
Can you say when these trusts were established?
There's multiple different trusts and corporate forms and organizations that have been formed over periods going back a decade or more for a lot of them, much longer than that for others. There are restricted assets that can't be used for certain purposes. There are parish assets that aren't part of the diocese estate. They're not part of this bankruptcy action. I can't articulate every single one. And the point of the bankruptcy filing is to articulate the ones that we do control and that can be contributed to the estate.
Are you talking financial, then just money, when you say?
Well, it says in the petition, assets are assets. There's an estimation of what the diocesan assets are. So the assets belonging to the diocese.
Were any moved before this filing?
No. Yeah, Dennis.
Can you give us a sense of what happened here? So you had this program where you were paying victims, right? Did more people decide not to get involved in that and went outside that with suits?
Look, I think...
And you thought it was too much?
The bishop said that the diocese for a long period of time has been on unstable financial ground, right? So the Survivors Compensation Fund was a good faith effort to do the right thing and try to help survivors of abuse who were abused by priests in the diocese. And it was, of course, everybody's expectation that that fund would be a good faith and a fiscally responsible way to try to care for the survivors and not starve out the rest of the diocese from doing all the charitable works it does and all the ministry and the spiritual works that it does. And it was everybody's hope that would have succeeded. It was during the time we were running the fund, the Rice case happened. And then New Jersey opened a window. And as you'll see, I think increasingly around the country, maybe even in Pennsylvania, a lot of organizations, this diocese included, just don't have the capacity to absorb potentially massive liabilities like the Rice case allows for a diocese like this to have. So I don't want to say there's one precipitating event, because there isn't, but I can tell you that it was our intention in doing the fund to try to stave this off, and then we had Rice and the calculus changed.
You're the first and thus far only diocese to do this in Pennsylvania. Do you anticipate the others?
Look, I don't want to speculate on any particular diocese. I do feel comfortable saying that I think this will be part of a trend nationally for the Catholic Church, other religious organizations, charitables, nonprofits, to manage all of the good things they're trying to do against the potential liability from really historic tort claims. And I don't think this is the last one of these you're going to see. in Pennsylvania or across the country. In fact, I think it's the alpha, not the omega. Mark?
The parish-by-parish trust system that's outlined in the bankruptcy filing, when were those trusts set up?
I think 2009.
And did their establishment have anything to do with the with concern about liability over this?
Well, I didn't set them up, so I can't speak to why they were set up. I think it's common practice in the Catholic Church and frankly in the nonprofit world and other religious organizations to organize discrete religious entities that way. I don't think that's particularly uncommon or emblematic of some sort of deeper concern.
And to follow up maybe on Angela's question, did you respond to the question? Was there an attempt to tally up the assets that the constituent parishes own?
Not by me, and I would doubt by anyone attempting to put together the bankruptcy because they're not in the bankruptcy. I mean, we didn't go ask for assets of schools. They're not in the bankruptcy. I mean, they're not part of this action right now.
But they now own all their own real estate.
Well, they always did. I mean, no, I don't know, but they've always been their own separately incorporated entities, and they have ownership rights of whatever they have ownership rights of. And I don't know that I can go diocese by diocese, and I can't articulate every one, but they have their own buckets of stuff and money, and that's not in the diocesan bucket of stuff and money.
Matt, I want to read to you a statement from the Attorney General, just ask you to respond to it if you would.
Okay.
It's of no surprise to me that these dioceses who engaged in sophisticated cover-ups of child sexual abuse have found a legal maneuver to skirt responsibility, absolve themselves financially, and continue to avoid transparency. This is yet another attempt to deny survivors the justice that they're owed by the church. Can you respond?
You know, I think as a chief law enforcement officer, our Attorney General has done a pretty good job. But I'll say this, I don't think it's the chief law enforcement officer's job to tell people in the Commonwealth and criticize people in the Commonwealth when they are obeying the law and following the law. Whether it's people availing themselves of their rights under our state constitution, or whether it's a nonprofit entity availing itself of federal bankruptcy rights. That's a policy question, and I think that's better answered by the General Assembly. I don't think it's a valid criticism for a law enforcement officer to criticize someone for obeying the law.
Matt, earlier you mentioned insurance potentially covering claim payouts. Has that actually occurred to date?
Well, not in a meaningful way, and as a matter of fact, today, right after the filing of the bankruptcy petition, there was a separate complaint filed against all of the diocesan insurance carriers who potentially have coverage over the years that claims could accrue. And we take really seriously the insurer's obligation to step up and pay their fair share, pay what was contracted for, and we're going to pursue them for it. So far, they haven't really done that, but if it takes a legal filing and a complaint and litigation with the carriers, we intend to do it.
Do you anticipate that?
We filed one. So, I mean, I don't know how it'll end. I hope it ends that the carriers do the right thing and they contribute to the bankruptcy estate and they contribute to the fund that's going to be used to satisfy victims' claims. And I hope they do the right thing.
So to date, how many claims have been paid out and how much money and where is that money coming from?
So the best metric here is the Survivors Fund. And the survivors from the fund who used the fund were paid about, in aggregate, $12.7 million. And I think there was 111, I always get that number wrong, 111 people who went through the fund and successfully settled with the fund.
And where's the money coming from right now? If you're only listed 1 to 10 million in assets, where's this money?
Well, that money's already spent, right? I mean, that's money that fund was created some time ago. That money's not prospective. That's money that already was paid out to victims to resolve their claims and to help survivors. So that's, asking about where that money is now is really not relevant.
Matt, the vast majority of the abuse cases that were documented in the grand jury investigation fell out of statute. And Mr. Gaynor just said that since 2016, that the diocese has been challenged financially because of these mounting lawsuits. But if the majority of cases were out of statute, what was the tipping point?
Well, remember, Evie, in the fund paid out claims that were time barred. So the vast majority, I think maybe even almost all of the claims paid out by the Survivors Fund were time barred. And it wasn't just diocesan priests, it was order priests too. So it was priests from other dioceses who either were here visiting or were getting incarnated here. So that's a substantial amount of claims that had those survivors gone to court, at that time, they wouldn't have been able to bring. Now, after that, when the Rice case went up to Superior Court, and as of right now, that case is the law in the Commonwealth, it's not quite that the original tort claims are revived, but it's a different legal theory that no one anticipated. It's frankly a very novel theory. I'm not sure how it'll hold up when it goes to the Supreme Court, but that's sort of reopened a whole new avenue for survivors with historic claims to make lawsuit or to file lawsuits against the diocese.
And I would just add to that while we're focused on the clergy sex abuse, the last few cases we've had involved folks that were not clergy.
So the bankruptcy, of course, is going to manage all of those claims, not just clergy claims, claims against lay people, claims against teachers.
What makes up the diocesan resources? Is it mostly real estate? And are those, it's real estate or it's other assets, or are all of them vulnerable, possible?
Look, I think it's a mix. I think there's some real estate, liquid assets. A lot of it's put into the bankruptcy filing. I mean, as I understand it, and I'm not a bankruptcy lawyer, the process will involve an evaluation and then sort of a reconstitution of the diocese and its assets and what it owns, and it'll be an attempt to sort of in a ratable way cause the diocese to pay in to the fund that'll be used to pay the bulk of the creditor claims, which really is going to be, other than the PNC claim, which is in the filing, survivor claims. So it may not even matter at the end mark exactly what it is today. At some point there will be a number that the diocese will have to pay over to the fund to get out of bankruptcy. And we have no idea what that's going to be yet or how we'll pay it.
Just to be absolutely clear, I mean, ahead of the bankruptcy, parish properties are not considered in this total overall valuation?
If since the parishes are not in the bankruptcy, if a parish owns something, whether it's real estate or funds or a work of art, that's not included in the bankruptcy estate, and it can't be included in the bankruptcy estate because those entities did not file for bankruptcy. So no, those assets are not included in the bankruptcy estate.
They are diocesan assets?
No, they're parish assets. I mean, that's.
What does the diocese own?
I mean, I think it's spelled out in the filing pretty well. Buildings like this, some funds, some restricted, some unrestricted, meaning they could be potentially used in a bankruptcy.
I'm just having a hard time understanding if all that parish property is already separate from the bankruptcy, then what changes under the reorganization, really?
Well, look, the reorganization for any ongoing concern, whether it's a private business or a church or a nonprofit or a charity, is an idea that you have an organization that financially is paying out more than it's taking in, and there could be 100 different reasons for that. It's an attempt, and it really is, I think, unfortunately, bankruptcy anyway is used as sort of a pejorative or a dirty word. It really shouldn't be. It's a good faith effort to try to get an organization that doesn't want to skip out on its bills, but wants to be responsible about going forward and putting itself in a good financial position, the breathing room and the assistance to do so.
But the message here, though, to the person who might be filing a claim would be that there will be fewer resources available as part of a claim going forward.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, remember, we sued the insurers for exactly that reason. To date, we've gotten essentially no money from insurers for historic claims that are time barred. That's why we sued the insurers, because we think that the insurers have significant liability to the bankruptcy estate, and we think they have a significant responsibility to put real substantial assets into the fund that's going to be used to pay out future survivor claims. So that's where I think a lot of the money ideally is going to come from.
And just one last question is, did the priests coming down here, a lot of them, when I talked to them, they said they didn't know what they had come down here for. Did they know why they were coming down here? What was the message given to them as they go back to the 15 counties to try to...
Same message I gave when I stood up, that the diocese is going to be the same tomorrow as it is today. This is an attempt to get the diocese on good, solid financial footing.
In the bankruptcy process, is it possible that the estimated assets will be challenged, that the bankruptcy committee will say, you have to put more stuff in that pool, you have to be more transparent about?
I don't think it's a transparency issue as much as I think at the end it'll be a negotiation about what can the diocese afford to pay into the fund to get out of bankruptcy. Less about, okay, where is it coming from and what bucket it is, but what is a fair amount for the diocese to contribute to the fund that's going to be used to pay these historic claims.
I just got to throw this out there. In 2009, when the Diocese of Wilmington, Delaware, reorganized under bankruptcy, and that's a fraction of the size of the Harrisburg Diocese, their estimated value was $2.1 billion. So you have a far larger diocese here, and it's just mind-boggling that it's 1 to 10 million versus 2.1 billion.
Look, do you know how they were organized in a corporate form? I mean, do you know if the parishes were separately incorporated there? Do you know if that counts insurance money? Do you know if that counts religious orders in the state? Because if it doesn't, then it's impossible to compare those two things. You can't. I mean, every diocese, I heard Bishop say this today, if you've seen one diocese, you've seen one diocese. It's not, that kind of calculus is really superficial and not particularly helpful to the discussion.
Do parishes ever get sued in these abuse cases?
They have in Philadelphia, yeah, they have.
And is that something that is that just a separate question from the diocese point of view, or is there?
Well, I think what will happen, Mark, as I understand it, is there'll be an effort to involve the parishes in some way in the bankruptcy process. So there isn't inconsistent results. I mean, certainly, if an insurer is going to settle with the diocese, it's going to want to know that all of its obligations are covered. So I expect that during the process, and experts can tell you otherwise, but I think during the process, they'll be brought into the process, and efforts will be made to sort of resolve all of the historic abuse claims against anyone who might be a potential defendant.
We'll take one more, and then we're
All
going
right.
to wrap
Well,
up.
my question kind of follows up on Mark's. I think we can kind of one question.
Sure.
You mentioned before that some of these people who are going to be sued are teachers, they're people who are not technically, I guess, employees of the diocese because things are organized in such.
Well, they could be. I mean, it depends on who we're talking about.
Yeah, and so if they are an employee of a school district, or a school, for instance, I mean, you can't access the school's money, but you're still being sued over this.
So remember how, I mean, a lot of these lawsuits work. I mean, this happens when parishes are sued in other dioceses under a respondeat superior theory, meaning we're responsible for all the employees in the diocese, even if they are employed by an entity that isn't the diocese. That's how these lawsuits are pled. So the diocese gets dragged into those lawsuits regardless because of the corporate interrelatedness between the entities and because of the respondeat superior theory. So I think that's why you think about those folks when you're talking about people who could be claimants.
Is
This
there-
is an easy one. Do you have an estimate for how many outstanding victims there are?
It's in the pleading.
Yeah, it's in the. I think we have an estimate of as high as maybe 200 additional, and that's that's everybody. That's lay people. That's teachers. That's clergy.
Dennis.
All right, Dennis.
What do you say to victims? You answered, you responded to the Attorney General. But what do you say to victims that say this is all just a shell game? You're saying we don't have money here, it's over here. That's not diocese money. That's the parish. That you're trying to skirt the responsibility of helping make them whole.
Now, absolutely not. To the contrary, I think this is the most responsible thing that we can do for victims and survivors, and for the people who are supported by diocesan charities, and for all the faithful of this diocese. It's an attempt to try to do right by everybody not short shrifting one group over another group. It's a fair process. It's as fair, I think, as a process can be to try to satisfy all those obligations with a limited amount of money.
Yeah, and I would encourage you, Dennis, to look at the article today. I believe it was in Evie's story about the Boy Scouts, and one of the top trial attorneys who's
Suing the diocese.
he's handled many of the cases for the survivors against the diocese, believes that this is a fair process and a way to equitably treat survivors.
And just listing assets at just between 1 and 10 million doesn't leave a perception that you are trying to shortchange victims.
Well, we can't, any more than the diocese couldn't list your assets. If it doesn't belong to the diocese, it can't list it in a legal filing. Make no mistake, the complaint against the insurance carriers is designed to drive, I think, a substantial amount of money, and probably the biggest pot of money that will be used to satisfy survivors.
Can you estimate how much?
No, I mean, it wouldn't be too early. It's too early.
Give us like a magnitude of how much?
More than your total assets?
Yes. I mean, that would be the amount. Yes, I mean, the amount we're talking about is more than the amount we're seeking anyway. Is going to be more than the total assets. I mean,
Up to the 100 million, you have estimated that's a lot.
it depends on the policy limits, and I'm not, frankly, even if I was prepared, but yeah, it's too early, and I don't know the policy limits as I
When
stand
you
here.
said the number 200, you were talking about the additional exposure, 200 more people associated with the diocese who have their actions have put the diocese.
Well, it's an estimate. I don't have
Right.
200 names, Mark, but I mean,
Right.
it's a good faith estimate of what we think the universe of claimants is out there if
That
everybody ever
so-
came forward. Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Matt, you said churches and schools aren't going to close. Is that
No.
like a guarantee, or is there an option down the line?
Look, I told you, I'm not going to get into a guessing game. I can't. A reorganization inevitably is going to mean change. I don't know what that means today. So I can't say anything is absolutely never going to happen, and I can't say something is absolutely going to happen. I think through this process, one of the things that happens for private business and for nonprofits and charities like a diocese is an evaluation of, okay, what can you afford to do going forward? What are your options to be I mean, remember, the purpose of this is to come out as a well-run, stable business. So I don't know what that means yet. I don't think anyone knows what that means yet.
Matt, if the whole premise of this is good faith, right, and good, equitable, fair treatment, everyone involved, why would the diocese consider asking the parishes, if they have all the money, asking them for help to help compensate victims?
It's more than help. It's more than help. If those parishes want released, and this will all be part of the bankruptcy process as I understand it. So I'm going to tell you what I think or know, as a layman, sort of. All of the releases that will happen to local entities like parishes only happen if there is a financial contribution. So there's not something for nothing.
Well, I think that's a really important point, because when I asked some priests who were leaving the building, I thought it was a softball question. I was like, so what would you say to your parishioners in terms of, the money you put in the collection jar is not going to legal defense funds?
It's not.
Payout.
It's not.
They didn't seem like they were able to clearly answer that, though.
Well, I don't know who you talked to or what they said or what the questions were, but I can tell you money that's put in the collection plate doesn't go to lawyers, it doesn't go to me, it stays at the parish level. Now, what happens ultimately if a parish wants released in the bankruptcy, just like the diocese, is probably going to mean some parishes will have to pay into the bankruptcy estate. I don't know how much.
That's from the collection plate.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be. I mean, remember, parishes are separate corporate entities. They can have their own funds, they can have their own property, they can have wells or piles of money that are independent of what comes in every Sunday.
Well, what I didn't hear you just say was that the parishes are going to have to pay into the diocese as part of
We don't know that.
I mean, we don't know that for sure. That is one way that is one way that parishes get released. It doesn't mean every single parish has to pay the same amount or a lot or a little or, I mean, nominal. I mean, it could be not de minimis, but it could be a nominal amount, and we just don't know yet.
And as we go through this process, it demands transparency. So
Yeah.
you're going to see, as this moves forward, a very transparent process because, again, it's bankruptcy court.
For survivors looking for transparency, and that includes in the litigation process, because there is one in bankruptcy, there's discovery, and there's document turnovers, and there's very public litigation. This is about as transparent as you can get.
Last question, Mark.
Yeah,
All right.
a lawyer for the victims told me essentially that by going through the bankruptcy route now, with the statute of limitations constitutional amendment sort of in flux, you're locking in the value of claims at a lower rate, because if you can go in front of a jury, they're worth more, but if you freeze it in bankruptcy, they're worth less. Fair?
Mark, I don't know what to say to that. I want to remind you of what Mike told you a couple of minutes ago. One of the lead plaintiffs' lawyers who's filed a bunch of claims against the diocese yesterday said, in response to the Boy Scout bankruptcy, this is almost a public service for survivors. This is a good deal for survivors. Bankruptcy is a good thing for survivors. I mean, ask that plaintiff.
Victims aren't going to put it to a vote by them.
A victim's lawyer just said that yesterday.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not making it up.
So
You can look in.
like it, but isn't that true that the claims are worth less?
No, I don't know that. I can't prognosticate how a bankruptcy is going to turn out. That at the end of tell you what, at the end of the whole thing, ask that question again, and I'll give you the answer.
All right.
All right.
Well, we'll be around if you have any follow-up questions, but thank you guys for attending.
Thanks.